Welcome everyone to a new episode of comicbookinvest.com's Indie Spotlight series. We have some very special guests tonight, and in this video, we're going to discuss IDW's upcoming book, Canto. And we have the creators with us tonight. I'd like to welcome our special guests, David Booher and Drew Zucker, to the show tonight. Tell us a little bit about yourselves real quick.
All right, well, I'll start. Like you said, my name is David Booher, and I'm a writer. And not a lot of people know this about me, but I'm also an attorney, a practicing attorney. So I work with Drew, and we created Canto together. And I've been writing the scripts, and he's been making them look pretty. So there you go.
I'm Drew Zucker. I'm the artist for Canto, and I draw the book.
That's fine, because it's a damn good job of it you do, but yeah. In addition to that, as always, we have our special CBSI social content manager, Jack DeMeo. Go and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Brian. As Brian said, I am Jack DeMeo, aka Mr. Bolo, content manager for CBSI and comicbookinvest.com. Excited to be back here again for a new episode of CBSI Presents the Indie Spotlight series show. And very excited to talk about a new book coming from one of my favorite publishers that you hear me talk about all the time on the Bolo Show Live, IDW. But today I want to introduce our third member of our team. Usually it's me and Brian. Today we go with the free bird rule and bring in our third member, Andy Tomberlin from the Indie Spotlight series, the amazing article that drops Tuesdays right before New Comic Book Day, highlighting the brand new indie issues releasing every Wednesday for New Comic Book Day. Andy, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, what's up, everyone? I'm, as Jack said, Andy Tomberlin from the Indie Spotlight series over at CBSI and on Instagram at Indie Spotlight series. And I'm really excited about the guests we've got today, and David and Drew, and can't wait to talk about this book and get into it.
So that's who we have on the show tonight. We got three guys from CBSI, and we got the fantastic creators. But before we get into this book, we want to find out a little bit about their history. And one thing, we want to make sure all the Simple Man's Comic and CBSI families up to speed on you guys and your background in the industry. We're big fans of Vault Comics here, and we just produced a Queen of Bad Dreams variant with Vault. It's available at comicbookinvest.com. I know, David, you wrote Powerless and Alien Bounty Hunter for Vault. And Drew, you've been working with IDW, having done the art on 2 graphic novel releases in Skybreaker and The House. For those unfamiliar, tell us a little bit about yourselves and how you got to this point in your comic careers.
All right. Well, like you said, I had my first book ever that I created with Vault Comics called Powerless. And then from there, I also worked with them to co-write Alien Bounty Hunter, which came out, I think, in 2017. The first issue was out. Before that, I was probably I wasn't too much into comics when I was a kid, but I came to comics probably 12 years ago. Started going to San Diego Comic-Con, so I'm really big into indies like Image and IDW, creator-owned stuff. And so I just started enjoying this, and I was writing on the side screenplays. I wrote some novels, nothing that saw the light of day. And then I created the concept for Powerless and reached out to the guys at Vault Comics before they were even Vault Comics. And it turns out they were thinking about creating Vault Comics, and this came in at exactly the right time, and they really liked it. And I got to cut my teeth with Adrian Wassel, who's the editor-in-chief over at Vault. And he's just a spectacular editor, great person. They're all great over there. And we developed it from there. And from that experience, I was able to sort of take the next step, which was to create Canto. And Drew can tell more about the story, but essentially I knew Drew from social media, and I thought he was a fantastic artist. And the way I remember, this was a few years ago now, is I reached out to him on a short that I was going to write for him to be the artist. And he wasn't available at the time. And he, after he became available, sent me this concept art sketch of this little tin man that eventually became Canto. And it was literally seconds that I saw this sketch, and I thought, well, we're definitely writing a story about this character. He's adorable. He's amazing. He's so iconic. He's so visual and so recognizable. I was like, I'm doing it. I'm doing the story. whether he likes it or not. And he sent it to me, so he didn't have a choice. And Drew, I'll pass it over to you and take it from there if you want to talk about your background.
Sure. I'm a 2010 graduate from Savannah College of Art and Design. I was a sequential major while I was down there. After I graduated, I bounced around on a few small anthologies and eventually made my way to doing Skybreaker with Mike Morisi, which started off digitally at Monkey Brain Comics and then made its way over to IDW. After Skybreaker came out, I didn't do much. I had a period of about 5 years where I worked on a project with Philip Seavey called The House, which was a World War II horror comic that we put out through Kickstarter. And while we were in the middle of that, that's when David reached out to me about doing something. And on a whim, I had sent him the initial sketch of Canto along with a paragraph of what the story was meant to be. And he, like you said, within about 2 minutes, he came back and said, yeah, I can do this. That'll work for me. And I think like a week later, he sent me this massive pitch that took the bones of my idea and made it a much more palatable version of it.
What Drew sent me, I really envision this being sort of an all ages series with an iconic character. And one of the ways I approached the story is that I wanted to make an adventure about a character doing something not for himself. So we crafted this idea where he goes out into this world to save somebody else. So it's this ultimate selfless act. Because I think that's what audiences get behind. They get behind a character who's not doing anything. He's not doing it for himself. He's doing it for somebody else. And the audience, I think, connects with that and can cheer for him in highs and lows and all that. That's
very true. It's a story with heart, and that's pretty
puns.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's very, very good. Like I say, it's kind of one of those things that sounds like it was meant to be with you two hooking up and getting together there too.
The original concept, not for nothing, like I love what the original concept was, but it truly did require borderline somebody with a doctorate in theology in order to do it, because the original idea was much more broken down on what makes a person a person. This idea of the heart was still there, but the concept was I still think it's a good concept, but it's not something that I think in comic form or for the sake of mainstream audiences that a lot of people are able to swallow, in a way that it's like I can go and pay $3.99 for this book and enjoy it and read it with my kid and enjoy it and my kid can enjoy it, or I as an adult can enjoy it just as much. I think it skewed much more heavily to an adult audience. So when David came on board, he found a way to kind of cut through some of that and make it more of a for everybody book. And ironically, this is literally the same way The House got made, where I sent Philip at the time, I think, a paragraph, and he came back with 12 pages of story. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess this is who I'm working with.
Yeah, Drew needs and has a bunch of fixers. That's what we do. We just fix his life.
My wife fixes most of my life.
Right. I think it's about accessibility. I think in the comics industry now, and especially creator-owned, there's so much out there that's just complex and just a lot of dystopian sci-fi. And there's a great, super successful book that's out now. It's Little Bird from Image, and it's fantastic. It's a fantastic book. But you read it, and it's very unusual. We'll just put it that way. It's very unusual. So I think the accessibility is tough. And I wanted to have something that was much more, if you're a 9-year-old kid and you pick this up, you can get the story. And if you're the parents of that 9-year-old kid, you can also get something out of the story.
Yeah.
And we wanted we'll talk. I think we're going to talk about influences, so we can get into that too.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's huge. The appealing to all audiences. That's a big thing, for sure.
At least from my end, my big thing was I had spent, when I did the house, it took me 7 years from start to finish to do that whole project. And I love horror. It's probably one of my favorite genres to work in, especially in comics, because it's challenging as a comic to do a good horror comic. But I was so wiped out by the end of it, and the house takes place in World War II, so it was so reference heavy that I told myself I want to do a project where I literally don't have to reference anything. I can just draw out of my head, use my imagination, and just kind of run with it. And that's literally what I got from this project. I got to go wild with my imagination, and in the process collected more reference than I could ever possibly want on my computer. It turns out all this stuff has to be based on something.
Well, I think he hates when I say this, but I think this fantasy art that he does is just spectacular. Drew, you always say you like horror, you love horror, but man, I get inks from Drew probably on a daily basis for pages that he's still working on. And every new thing in my inbox is like, well, I just don't make any sudden moves. Don't touch any buttons. Whatever you're doing, just keep doing it because it's amazing. It's amazing.
That's a good thing.
It's a great thing. I got a page just before we started this.
Right.
It's just like, I don't know how you do it, but you do it. So keep doing it.
Okay. Do it. Do it.
Yeah, sure. Hours and hours at the table.
Don't change.
Nah, I like it too much. It's fun.
Coming June 26th, you guys are teaming up for a brand new 6-issue fantasy epic series, Canto, with IDW, as we have talked about a little bit. And the #1 issue will have a 1 in 10 incentive. Can you tell us a little bit about how that came to be and how you chose your artist for the incentive?
Well, sure. I can talk about it a little bit. IDW approached us when they picked up the book and asked if we wanted to do retailer incentive covers, because it's a really good way, from our perspective, to get shops on board. And if a shop wants to order 5, they'll order 10 if it means that they get the retailer incentive cover to go along with that. And Drew and I are active in the comics community, so we were able to reach out to some of our friends who are artists, who are spectacular artists. And the first person that we reached out to was my very good friend, Nick Robles. And he jumped on board immediately and created that retailer incentive cover for issue 1 that just everybody is responding so strongly to. It's just the spectacular promise of Canto on his quest that it's, it was, as soon as we got in our inboxes, we were like, this is it. We've got a slate of artists coming down the pike for retailer incentives. We've got Morgan Beam for issue 2, that the cover actually hasn't been revealed yet, but it's, I think I can reveal it's a watercolor, and it's just unbelievable. And then Jorge Corona of Middle West is doing the 3rd issue incentive. #4 is Philip Seavey, who did Tomb Raider and The Freeze for Image. #5 is Ben Bishop, who just has Drawing Blood. He works really closely with Kevin Eastman on the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. He sent the cover over. That's just unbelievable. And then we got Roberta in Granada for issue 6, who has done, is it Witchblade?
Yeah, she's doing Witchblade.
And again, her cover, we've already seen the rough of that. And it's, these covers are, we're trying, this is one instance where Drew and I are both trying to just keep up. So we've got those coming. Those are all 1 in 10s. And then we have a very special convention exclusive cover for issue 1, because issue 1 and 2 are going to be out. Issue 2 comes out on July 10th, which will be just the week before San Diego Comic-Con. So we are debuting a convention exclusive cover. And I'm not sure what the numbers are on that, but I think it's going to be fewer than the print run is going to be less than any of the retailer incentives.
So that's a major bolo here for you guys. Be on the lookout. Look out if you're going to SPCC or if you're pre-ordering any of these variants, keep a lookout for that Canto #1 variant. Like he said, the book will already have been released for a couple weeks. You'll have the hype building. It's a great time to jump on what will probably be the most limited cover available. And I've got to say, guys, I think it's really cool that you guys are doing more than just incentive for issue #1. A lot of new series is you'll see the incentive for issue #1, as you said, meant to hook people into that first issue. And then as issue #2, 3, and 4 go on, there isn't that same incentive for retailers to jump on board. You're basically just trying to attract those core readers. I think it's really great that you guys are doing that. And I also applaud you on a diverse list of artists who have different styles and bring a lot of different things to the table. And I definitely agree on Ben Bishop. I think he's one of the most, I've met him a few times at conventions. He's one of the most slept on artists. He's a major up and comer. If you haven't seen his TMNT work, you got to check it out. His TMNT Ghostbusters variant is amazing. So I think you guys hit a home run with that selection of artists.
Is the variant for TMNT Ghostbusters was the one where like all of the proton pack is like coming in? Is that the one?
Yes.
Like all the lightning bolts and stuff? Yeah. Oof.
It is absolutely standout. It's one of those covers you see, and when you see it, you immediately say, who's the artist who did that?
Yeah.
Right. Well, it's same for Canto, so we're really excited about that and all of the artists we got.
So are we. I kind of want to dive into the body of the book a little bit. I know from looking at Previews World, we've seen that some of the influence were Wizard of Oz, Dante's Inferno, some of those things. And I've even heard Never Ending Story thrown in there. Kind of says a lot to the age group too of what you're going at. Talk a little bit about that for us.
So my standing edict that I had with regards to this whole thing was I was looking to do with Canto what Ghostbusters did for me, where I watched Ghostbusters. I had to have been about six or seven the first time I saw it. As I got older, I would continue to watch it, and obviously, as you get older, you learn a little more about the world, and what the movie says to you changes as you read it. That was the idea that I wanted to do with Canto, that somebody could read this at 9 years old and then come back to it when they're 15, and it has a totally different meaning for them. Or then they come back to it when they're 25, and it continues to evolve. Your understanding of the material as you get older, as you have life experiences, makes it fresh for you all over again. And that was a big part of what I wanted to do with the book. As far as stuff that influenced the physical story, I would say the two biggest ones were Dante's Inferno and The Wizard of Oz, just from a story structure with Dante's Inferno. And then for Wizard of Oz, where we were kind of pulling, obviously Canto is a nod to the Tin Man, but we were pulling from that sort of world. And throughout the book, you see these kind of nods to the Wizard of Oz and to Dante's Inferno, and then to a whole bunch of other stuff that, we both loved growing up.
Yeah, for me, the big story, I like to say the plot was influenced by Dante's Inferno, and the characters were influenced by Wizard of Oz. And it's sort of this great mashup where we take all of these inspirations and put them together and make a new story that if you're familiar with Inferno and you're familiar with Wizard of Oz, you're going to be able to pick out these different things that inspired us. And then the feel of it was interesting, was the arts coming in with from Drew. It's edgy, and it felt like the sandbox we were playing in was Dark Crystal, Labyrinth, Neverending Story, Gmork, the wolf from Neverending Story when he's in the shadows. I mean, that's terrifying for a 9-year-old kid, but 9-year-old kids watched it. The Skeksis from Dark Crystal, just crazy. Those are the images that I keep with me. And I think that's why I remember them so much, is because they were unsettling and it made you connect with the story more. So we're drawing on those wonderful Jim Henson 80s sort of fantasy influences and making them our own. And I've heard a lot of people talk about it. It feels like Canto sort of lives in that Jim Henson world. And honestly, that's the hugest compliment for us, because the world of Jim Henson is amazing. And to have people recognize that sort of where we're taking this and where we want to go with this, it's just fantastic.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I love it. I love the characters. Like I say, I've got the honor and the privilege to look at the first issue and love it. I mean, the like you say, the nod to the Tin Man and all of that. I mean, it's there. So fans of those series, this is one for you for sure. That kind of brings me into my next thing in the artwork. Like you say, the nod to the Tin Man a little bit. We've talked about. We've kind of really hit on it as far as like the influences of the artwork is Wizard of Oz-ish. What are some of the other influences of the art?
So when we started off on this, I wanted to try to manipulate my style from what I had been doing. And I started skewing heavily to Scotty Young and realized I was a poor imitation of Scotty Young for a second there. And I went back and reworked what I was doing and realized that the worst thing I could do for the book and the most disingenuous thing I could do for the book was actually change the way I drew anything. And instead I just told myself, no, stick with it and do what you do. So everything else I've done up until this point is the same sort of style that you'll see in Canto. It's just applied across it's applied across the content that we're dealing with. I mean, as far as my influences go, it ranges from Jim Chung to Tim Bradstreet to Bernie Wrightson. It's a big swath of people I look at.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was getting at. Is it's almost a style of its own. It's hard to compare it to anything, and I like it. It's definitely something that the people love once they get it in their hands, and like I say, once you see the characters, you almost fall in love with them immediately. As David said, when he's ready to jump on the story just from seeing that, So that's huge.
Well, and that's something honestly that makes me so happy to hear, because there's a lot of books, creator-owned books that are out there right now from a lot of major publishers that all feel the same. They're different, but they feel very similar. And Canto doesn't. I mean, it just doesn't look like or feel like or read like most of the books that are out there, and that may end up. It's kind of a double-edged sword, right? People are, sometimes can be afraid of new and different. But on the flip side, if people connect with it, it could be something that they really, it fills a void in the market that readers don't even know necessarily is a void until they get something. And they're like, no, we really want this kind of all ages fantasy that's kind of in a dark world. And you got a character that you can root for, and it's about hope and that sort of thing.
Well, you definitely succeeded there for sure in doing all of that.
Cool.
Hats off.
Thank you.
So far, we've received a bunch of great information from the creators, but we would be remiss to not also shout out Vittorio Stone, who does a fantastic job on colors, and Darren Bennett, who is doing the lettering and has worked with David in the past at Vault, correct?
That's correct, yeah. He's actually lettered every book that I've ever done. I mean, I'm going to be hard-pressed to go to a different letterer.
Yeah.
How important is it? I don't think letterers and then colors, a lot of them get the credit, but you always mention interior art and cover art.
Well, I can tell you from my perspective, all the stuff that I need Drew to fix, I just tell Vittorio, fix it. I'm just kidding. Drew's art is perfect, but Vittorio, I mean, there's a spectrum in Drew. You can talk about working with colorists, but there's a spectrum of colorists, and when we get Vittorio's pages in, it's like tweaks here and there because he nails the mood, he nails the texture, everything about every page that he sends in is just exactly in the tone and style of what we envision. And then Darren, I will write scripts that are literally impossible to letter. There was a page, it was a full page spread in issue 3. And I gave a conversation between Canto and a creature. And the way it was drawn was this conversation was going to be impossible to put on the stage. Put on the page. And Darren found a way to send this page back to us with this conversation that actually made complete sense and you could follow it. And my jaw dropped because I just didn't know how he did it. But I was like, no sudden moves, don't do anything. He's got it.
My next question is basically how did the deal? We've heard how the idea came about. Tell us how the deal came about. How did you guys get hooked up, IDW, and say let's make this thing happen?
Ruthless lawyering skills.
Yeah,
No,
for real. David walked into the room and lawyered them, and they had no idea what happened. They ended up paying us money.
They looked at each other like, "Who is that guy?" They didn't even know who I was. So this is something that I really enjoy talking about because I think this is the way I will approach creator-owned comics going forward for any book that I ever do, which is Drew and I got together. We did concept art, and then I brought Darren in his studio, and he did the lettering for the first 5 or 6 pages. Then we had the pitch, and we put the pitch together, which was sort of what's the world, what's the story, these sorts of things. And we put it together in this pitch document that he designed to be like an old-time fairy tale storybook.
Wow.
And we sent it around to a few publishers. I was really nervous about it, and I showed it to a few trusted friends, and the responses were really positive, so I thought, okay, we have something. Sent it around to a few different publishers, got some really good responses, and then IDW came to us and said, we put it through they have this committee, and I don't even know really who's on the committee.
I think it's just everything 3 random editors.
Yeah, so it went through this committee, and it came out on the other end as a yes. And this was mid last year. And it was kind of like we were both floored about it because IDW is one of those publishers where hopefully we get the foot in the door there, and it's sort of off to the races, but we'll see. Yeah. So one of the things we did while we were pitching this around is Drew and I continued to make the first issue. So Drew continued to draw it, and I continued to write the scripts. So by the time we locked down the deal with IDW, we had
1.5 done.
Yeah, I think we had 1.5 issues done because we were so excited about the story. We thought it's going to get published, whether by us or somebody else. And so by the time we signed the contract, we were already well on the way to get this into production.
That's huge. That's confidence in a story right there, and knowing that you have something good, and saying, like you said, hey, if these guys don't get it, somebody's going to. So,
well, it's not even, and it wasn't even about where it's going to go for a publisher. It was Drew and I were going to make this book. If we had to make it ourselves, we were going to make it.
That's sort of been my entire career. I have never collected a physical paycheck while I've made a book. It is just purely because I love drawing. I don't know what I would do with myself if I didn't draw. I mean, I'd probably just work an ungodly amount of overtime at work and be miserable like everyone else there. This is what I love to do. So either way, I need to express that need to tell stories. And I love drawing this. This is, I hope they're going to let us keep making it because this has been so much fun to draw. So when IDW came along and was like, yeah, we'll publish it, it's like, oh, thank God. This takes so much weight off my shoulders of having to do a Kickstarter again, of having to do all the promotion on my own again. And, it's just great from that end. And they've been awesome every step of the way.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And you said something there that kind of brings me to my next question. All right, I heard you say you hope they let you do more. Right now, 6-issue miniseries. is that it? Is the story wrapped up after that, or is there more to it that's just waiting to be told out there, so to speak?
Well, there's the answer to your question is yes, to all of those things. It wraps up. I don't want to scare anybody away because it wraps up in 6 issues for this story. But we definitely have a lot more story to tell. And by the time you get to the end of issue 6, there are seeds that will grow if given the opportunity, and will continue to tell the story of Canto. That said, this 6-issue arc is contained within itself, and I feel like it's very satisfying as a story on its own. I sort of look at it as a lot of these movie trilogies, like Lord of the Rings. The first movie is kind of its standalone with the opportunity to go forward, whereas the second and third movies are usually sort of a unit that's been broken up into 2. I feel like Canto is that way. We have 3 firm arcs that could be extended into 4. And I think you'll feel satisfied with the first story with the desire to continue on with it. And it's all going to depend on
those sales. Yeah.
So listeners, please go pre-order. Please ask your shops for it. Tell them how much you love Canto. And, let's all create together this opportunity to keep telling Canto's story.
And I promise, if we get to go beyond volume 1, there is a lot of stuff that we have planned. I have a journal of notes of just scenes I want to do and just details for the world. There's a ton of stuff that this first arc is very much the motto I used for it was keep it simple, stupid, because if you overload people with world building, it becomes a problem. It's easier for us to just put Canto on his path and have him introduced to the world the same way the reader's introduced to the world. And that seems to have worked for us. So hopefully if we're lucky enough to continue on with this, we get to do more of this and explore more of his world.
That's great. That's huge news right there, and it's awesome to hear that there's already stuff, like you say, in your brain ready for the next step, the next journey. So readers like to hear that when they invest in stuff. So
yeah,
that's a huge thing. And you heard it. Go out there and tell your shops you need this book. It's still available to order. You can even get the incentive copy still. So check it out.
But you guys released a great trailer for Canto on the IDW YouTube channel, which I really feel like is a great way to tell a story and to get potential readers engaged. Can you tell us how you feel about that trailer and how it came to be?
Drew?
I'll let David do it because he handled the brunt of the heavy lifting as it was related to this. I sat back and kind of yelled at him to relax most of the time, but he really handled that trailer. He deserves a lot of credit for.
So that's like definitely a window into our dynamic. I keep telling Drew to work harder and he keeps telling me to relax. That's just us. So the way the trailer came about is I had a friend, Stephen Scott, who is a great comics creator in his own right, and who's actually directed trailers in the past for comic books. And he raised the possibility of creating a trailer for Canto and helping us out with it. So he wrote the script for it, and he connected with the animation studio and really sort of directed and produced and wrote and created it. The idea being that you create a trailer and you get people excited about the book. And it seems to have worked for IDW's other IDW books in the past. I think there was an Afterlife with Archie one, and a couple years ago, and a couple others. And so that's sort of how we decided that we wanted to push this into that sort of animation space. And of course, it's going to be helpful if we ever get approached to develop it into something else beyond comics, to have actually moving pictures. Really is going to give us a boost.
Stephen really deserves a ton of credit for this. When he came on, we actually hired him as a publicist in addition to IDW's publicity staff, just because, you know, IDW is a big company. They have a lot of books to keep track of, and we're one small piece of a very large pie. So we thought it might help us out to have somebody that's really in our corner just fighting for Canto, and the results have been, you know, pretty good. And that trailer is really Steven's baby. And just what he's done with it has been awesome from start to finish.
So as we said, guys, be sure to stay tuned to the end of the interview where we are going to show you the entire Canto trailer coming from IDW on June 26th. Obviously, coming from all of us writing for comicbookinvest.com and CBSI, our audience is very speculation-driven. What would you guys say your hook would be to the speculation crowd on why they need to jump in and pre-order this book?
I'll say 7 seasons in a movie.
Good
I
answer.
don't know. That's a tough question. I don't know. I don't know how to answer that other than we have literally poured our souls into this book to make it spectacular. And our feedback, it sounds kind of self-congratulatory, but we're very nervous about it going out into the world, and the response has been very positive. So without getting too much into that, we are very, very hopeful it's going to be successful. So I guess that would be my pitch to come on board early, because this is early. And if it does catch on like we're hoping to, then the early iterations of this are going to be the ones that your audience is really going to want to be on board with early on.
Good answer. That's a good answer for sure.
7 seasons in the movie, and we cut the glass.
7 seasons in a movie. I'm feeling that from you.
So much being done in the animated TV and movie space. Do you see Canto as the type of story playing out on that type of medium?
I would say so. My inclination for absorbing media is much more through TV and movies than it is comics. I love comics, but my father raised me on movies and TV, so that's where my connection really is, and it's where I learned so much storytelling. And part of the fun of that is how do you bring the in motion image to a single image medium. But I think a lot of my work would translate well to it, and that's very much where I hope we get to go with this. I think there's more story to be told in that kind of format, and hopefully somebody else sees it that way too.
Right.
Yeah, and for me, we created Canto as a comic book, eventually to be a graphic novel. And that's sort of where we poured our passion into. And if it finds life, which we're hopeful it finds life in the animated space or outside of comics, but we set out to create a comic, and everybody else down the road can get on board. Yeah. Rather than sort of reverse engineering it, right, and hoping that it's going to be an animated series or movie or whatever, and then creating a comic to generate that success. So first and foremost, we created a comic book, and we really hope that as Canto grows up and goes out into the world and has his adventure, that we can bring it to a wider audience through the screen, whether that's film or TV. Yeah. But it's a comic first and foremost, and as you can see from the trailer, there is that opportunity to take it beyond that.
All right, guys, so there you have it. We've got David Booher, Drew Zucker, telling you about their upcoming release, Canto, coming on June 26th. Make sure you contact your LCS and pre-order. We've got the number 1 in 10 incentive coming from Nick Robles. Make sure you guys are contacting your LCS, getting in touch with your Diamond representative. If you're a store owner, make sure you get on board. Also, for you store owners, IDW has made this book returnable beyond 10 copies. So you can take that chance, get it in the hands of readers, and make sure that we get this series in front of as many people as possible. Again, we are going to play that trailer at the end of this video, so stay tuned for that. And again, June 26th, be on the lookout. Bolo for Canto, hitting stores that Wednesday, the #1 issue, June 26th.
Now, I just want to say thank you guys for coming on the show. I've learned a lot myself. I mean, I knew a little going in, and now I feel like I've walked away knowing a lot. And I've walked away wanting to go hunt that 1 in 10 incentive right off the rip. So basically, I just want to give you guys this time to give it your shot, man. Tell everybody why they should go out and get Canto 1 on June 26th.
7 seasons in a movie.
Best answer you could have.
I'm just kidding. I guess I'll just say it again. We really sort of poured our hearts and our creative hearts and souls into this. And, you know, saying pour our hearts into this is kind of funny, cliche for the story. But yeah, we've poured our hearts and souls into this book, and we've created something that we are passionate about. And I just hope that when you pick up that first issue, you see that passion, and it just keeps sort of picking up steam. We have these more incentive covers. We have limited covers. You know, we can hopefully, if people like this enough, we can really create a whole universe for Canto and create some really unique things for him down the road. So thank you so much for going out there on June 26th and picking him up.
Yeah, just to piggyback on what David said, I mean, we've put everything we've got into this, and we both truly believe that from a retailer perspective, from a customer perspective, across the board, that this is a book that not only fills a void, but is something a little bit different than what's in the industry at the moment, and can help bring more people to the industry, as well as just, you know, bring people some enjoyment. So, you know, hopefully this does very well for everybody involved, for IDW, for us, for shops, and everybody gets to enjoy the ride, and we get to keep doing this a little bit longer. So please, on June 26th, go out, buy the book, let your retailer know you like it, and, you know, we'll see what happens, but we're hoping for good things for Canto.
Yeah, and one of the big things that I want to touch on too before we get out of here is the fact of just let this one soak in. This is a book that's, when you're 9 and you read it, it's going to be different than when you're 20 and you read it, and it's going to be different when you're 40 and you read it, and it's going to be different when you're 80 and you read it. And then that was something huge that I felt you said, and that just speaks to. It's hard to say it without saying it. It's the heart of the book, the guts of the book. You know, I mean, that's what it is. So that is what, in essence, makes a true spec book too. Having the reader buzz, having all that attached to it. So, like I say, I've read the first issue, and I can definitely vouch for it. It is a great read and makes you want to go right into #2.
We went looking through the industry to see if something else like this existed, and it maybe there's some stuff that has existed in maybe the same genre or realm once upon a time, but in terms of like the last year and a half, there isn't much, and there isn't much I've seen on the horizon either that kind of wants to play in this space. So, you know, it, like David said, it's a risk, because everything goes in a circle in these industries. Zombies won't be popular for 20 years. 20 years from now, we'll be back on zombies. So this thing can hit at the wrong time and go nowhere, or it can hit at just the right moment and, you know, jumpstart an entire genre. So we're hoping for the jumpstart, but, you know, it's one of those things. It's a risk. So to hear people responding positively to it is just, it means the world to us.
Helpful. Yeah. All right. For all you viewers out there, here's the trailer for our little tin hero in search of a heart, Canto.
I just want to thank everyone again for coming and joining us and being a part of this. And I hope everyone's as excited as I am about this book coming out now, June 26th, Canto. Don't miss it. It's one to watch out for. Like I say, if it's not on your radar, it should be. If you're not checking out comicbookinvest.com, do it. I write a weekly article there that drops on Tuesday, Indie Spotlight series, where I try and highlight every indie comic that should be on your radar. I don't get every one. I hit and miss. I can promise you Canto is definitely going to be one on the list. Also, give me a follow at Indie Spotlight series on Instagram. I try and give some updates there on stuff that's happening in the indie comic world, news breaking, movie deals, whatever I can to help you keep informed. So with that being said, big thank you to Jack and Brian for putting this deal on, and big thanks to David and Drew for coming on and being a part of this and helping to spread the word on this creation they have that could be very big. So pay attention, folks. And like I say, thank you to Jack and Brian again.
Right. So like we always say, this show is Andy's show. It's the Indie Spotlight show. It's his world. We're just living in it. But I also want to thank David Booher and Drew Zucker for joining us tonight. A lot of great information about Canto. The book, it sells itself, but by talking to these creators, I want to buy the book even more just because great people. So I want to support the creators and the book itself. So definitely want to thank them. Before we say goodbye to them, Jack, is there anything you want to tell people watching?
Well, as you guys know, my name is AKA Mr. Bolo, and I'm telling you right now, there's a major bolo on Canto #1. June 26th from IDW. I can almost guarantee it'll be on the bolo list, and watch out. It may just be that long-term play of the week.
So Dave and Drew, can't thank you guys enough for coming on. Before we go, is there anything you'd like to let the audience know?
I'll just say be on the lookout for Canto #1, June 26th, comic shops everywhere. And thank you so much for your support now and in the future for our little Tin Man.
Yeah, same thing. Guys, thank you so much for having us on. And June 26th, Canto comes out. Please support the book. Hopefully you enjoy it, and hopefully we get to keep making more of this stuff and come back again and talk with you guys.
So there you have it, guys. David Booher and Drew Zucker, creators of Canto #1, out June 26th. Make sure you pre-order at your local comic book store. Make sure you get there on the day of release. Definitely pick it up. If it's not there, don't say we didn't warn you. But with that being said, thank you guys for watching, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Indie Spotlight Series.